All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. I am so excited about our event tonight, and I'm so excited about our guests. And honestly, more than anything, I'm so excited that you're here and that it's our launch week. For those of you I have not gotten a chance to meet yet, my name is Sarah, and I'm the CEO and founder of Holdette. And this is the first event of our launch week, which is a celebration of the release of our first line of women's suits, which have 8 functional pockets for your phone, your wallet, and all of your snacks. And if you haven't had a chance to check them out yet, you can do so at holdette.com. And you can see the full calendar of our launch week events at holdette.com/launch week, as well as enter our amazing giveaways. And just to put it out there to support our growing small business, I'd love to encourage you to follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn. And we have a budding TikTok presence. So if you're interested in that, you can go and follow us on TikTok. As you all know, tonight we are going to be talking about the things that we wish we knew in our first year post-grad. Now, to be honest, it is my first year post-grad, so I'm learning as much as you all are in the audience. So I'm going to give our panelists a chance to go ahead and introduce themselves. Toya, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Hi, Sarah, and welcome everyone. I'm really happy to be here today. My name is Toya Del Valle, and I am the Vice President of Client Success at Cornerstone On Demand. I am based out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and I am a wife, a mother, former college student ×2, and really happy to be with you all today. So thank you, Sarah, and good to see you all.
Awesome. We're so glad to have you. Emily?
Hi, everybody. My name is Emily Kennison. I am the founder and CEO of Straplets. Originally, I was a lawyer turned entrepreneur, had an idea for an invention, brought it to market, quit my job, and I'm here today now about to launch my second product, which you'll see as Curl Scarf in the coming months, which is very exciting. So nice to meet everybody.
Awesome. And Alyssa?
Hi, everyone. I'm Alyssa. I graduated from Boston University in 2019, where I studied public relations and computer science. Now I work at Adobe as a solutions consultant.
Awesome. Well, we are so excited that you three are here, and we're going to jump right into it. We have 4 main categories for tonight's questions, which just fall into some general overarching questions, and then we're going to get into career, finances, and social life, all things that are important to have when you're graduating, and I imagine for all of life, but I cannot speak that far. So to kick things off, let's start, I would say easy, but this is probably actually a pretty big question. What are like just maybe one major piece of advice that you would have to someone that is just graduating college, going into post-grad life, or what is something that you wish that you had known, or a piece of advice that you wish you had received? And Emily, why don't you start us off?
Sure thing, I'd be happy to. So I think one thing that's really interesting is when you're in college, you are in the study environment. You're constantly learning. You're not afraid to ask questions. You're not afraid to kind of look dumb if you don't know, because you're supposed to learn. And when you graduate, you enter into a specified field, and you're supposed to know everything, or at least you think you are. And that's not actually the case. That idea of like learning and asking questions and not being afraid to look dumb, it stays with you your whole life. And I think if you can keep that in mind and not be afraid to put yourself out there, you'll go much farther and be a much more confident person, because you're supposed to do that. Always be learning. Yeah.
That's awesome. I heard once that we care way more about ourselves than anybody else cares about us, because everyone's busy caring about themselves. So I think that that's relevant. Toya, you want to go next?
Sure. I would add that it's not a straight line. And I believe that we think, okay, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and it's going to work this way. And the reality is that it's not a straight line. And so I do believe that we're best prepared when we have a plan. But the reality is that have a plan so that when the things work, they work. And when they don't work, you know kind of what you're tracking to. Because in most cases, you will make changes. The environment will change unexpectedly, and new things will show up, and new opportunities and challenges will show up as well. So my best advice, it's just not a straight line. And I think we believe that it should be, but it totally is not. And for anyone, and if anyone says it is, they're just not telling you the truth.
That's awesome and an important lesson to remember. Alyssa?
I actually was going to say what Toya just said. It kind of relates back to how when we were in college, a lot of people, I'm sure, change their major very often. When you get out of college, you might want to change your career path, or like what Emily said, when you learn and you continuously learn and you learn new things, you might want to pivot to a new direction. And that's something that I started to learn basically every single year of college. I've had a different internship and I landed in a job where I didn't think I would be, and I'm so happy about it. So keeping an open mind continuously throughout your whole career is super important. But I also learned coming out of college, what was also important and kind of difficult for me to do is to always be an advocate for yourself professionally. So if you do check-ins with your manager, always talk about all the good things that you are doing, even though it's an uncomfortable conversation to have, to say, I can do X, Y, and Z. If you're in the tech world and there's not a lot of women out there, being an advocate for yourself is probably one of the most important things you can do to keep going in your career.
Okay, we're like starting so strong. Okay, the next question, which you guys perfectly rolled into, which was from one of our people who asked ahead of time. Is it possible to be too prepared? Should I enter this post-grad world with less than a 10-year plan or more of a go with the flow attitude? And Toya, why don't you start us off?
There. I think you should have both. So I think it is, and maybe not even a 10-year, like, I think you should have a plan and to go with the flow. Like, I actually think that you should have both, because you want to be anchored in something to know what you're working towards, but you also leave room for that to change. And you leave room for new experiences to come in to change your career path. You look for someone to ask you a question about yourself that you maybe didn't consider, and then you take a different journey. And so I think you should actually have both, with the agility and the flexibility to do what is serving to you and also serving to what your beliefs are. Sometimes we get into places where I said I was going to do this plan and I can't pivot from that because that's my plan. That's silly. There's also people that don't have any kind of plan and they wander and they waste time because they're not following any kind of path or any kind of direction. So both is my answer.
Amazing. Alyssa, anything you want to add?
Yeah, definitely. I think having that high level goal is super important to work towards. And there's so many different steps and goals that you can take that, go towards that high level goal that you want to have. For instance, when I was in college, I thought that my first job out of college, I would be a journalist at Vogue. I am now a consultant at Adobe. Two different roles, two completely different industries, completely different companies. But at the end of the day, I had this one interest, and that interest has always been in technology. And your path will always zigzag. You will never have that same path. But at the end of the day, if you think, like for me, my interest in technology is what I want to end up doing in life, there's going to be different goals that you need to achieve here and there to be in that specific industry that you want to be. Or if you want to accomplish that one goal at the end of the tunnel, there's just different ways to get there. That's totally fine. Some people like, not having a 10-year plan because it's intimidating, and that's fine too. As long as you have a direction, I completely suggest just having at least a direction.
Awesome. Emily?
I would add just that, like, we're talking about careers right now, but I think all the logic that Toya and Alyssa spoke about has to do with other elements of your life as well. Your job, your career is one part. It's a huge part. It should really make you feel fulfilled. But you can also look at your family, your relationships, your relationship with friends, your finances. And so if you're looking at, what are my goals, you can apply that mentality in those different buckets of your life that you find important. Spirituality, whatever it may be.
Question kind of after what you all just said around this goal and having something you're working towards. I can imagine for someone like just stepping out of college, we're kind of in a crazy place right now. Maybe you're going to end up pivoting from what you studied in college to what your first job is. How did you all, I guess in your own experiences, land on what that goal was? Like, how did you decide what you were working towards in the first place? Toya, do you want to start us off?
Well, I will say that I was one that thought I had a plan and then it changed. And so when I graduated from undergrad, I went for undergrad, University of Missouri. And for me, my only goal was to get a job that was not in Missouri. Like that was it. Like that's just kind of what it is. So my only job offer outside of Missouri was with Otis Elevator Company in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And so I was like, yeah, cool. All right. So I moved to Minnesota. And from there, I worked at Otis, and then I found friends. I knew friends that worked at Northwest Airlines, which is now part of Delta Airlines because they were headquartered in Minnesota, part of my friend network. And then was just kind of working, like, not so much focus on career, but more so like focus on job. And I'll say the big career pivot came for me was 9/11 when I was working in the airline industry during 9/11. And it just opened up so many points of operations management, but then it came into like disparity of people and treating people differently because a lot of that was happening around 9/11, around transportation. And that really changed in my career in a very different way than I didn't anticipate. So it was just kind of interesting how my circumstances, kind of Emily, what you were saying, circumstances really exposed me to what I was really interested in. Initially, it was just being independent and making it on my own and not being near family because I can do this. But I realized that, well, number one, you don't do anything on your own, but also that I could create a community and find myself in a space that I didn't anticipate.
That's awesome. And I feel like I'm soaking this all in personally as much as I hope our audience is as well. Alyssa, do you want to talk about your goals?
Yeah, I think how I come to or find a goal is when I continue to learn new things or speak to people or meet new people outside of the classroom. Like what Emily said earlier, you're going to always learn things on the job. You're always going to read things on LinkedIn, educate yourself in many different ways. So for instance, coming into college, I wanted PR and I wanted journalism. But once you start learning about different topics, whether it's finance, business, venture capital, entrepreneurship, you start gaining these interests other than what you're initially interested in. And then you just naturally start having a goal. At least for me, I just naturally started having a goal for myself. And the goals just kept piling onto each other as I kept learning new things and becoming open-minded, honestly.
Awesome. Emily?
Yeah, I pretty much want to say ditto to everything Alyssa just said. I went to law school because I lived in a town, all the big houses were from lawyers or doctors, and I wasn't going to be a doctor. That was going to take way too long. So law school it was. And I went to NYU Law, graduated, worked at a big law firm, and thought that would be the perfect path. Couple years in, I was interested in another space. It was called litigation finance. It's like you invest in lawsuits. It's kind of like venture capital, but for lawsuits. And so when I found a job opportunity in that space, I jumped into that. And all along this time, I'm building my own company. So I get to see, each of these individual elements of what it takes to build a product from the ground up, what it takes then to build a website, launch a product, do the marketing. And so between the two of them, I was able to understand, the finance side of everything, the legal side of everything, apply it to the business. But it's definitely been a windy road, but it is just pulling nuggets of things that you like, things that you don't like, understanding what you're good at, what you're not great at, and that's okay. And then crafting your own journey and goals based on that. Yeah.
Amazing. What it sounds like is like the stories wind, but like there's always common threads, right? And you're learning about yourself as you go along, and you land in the places that you're meant to land. So that's awesome. Something that's so interesting, and the more like recent grads that I've talked to, the more people who are like, I don't think that I have any hobbies. What am I supposed to be doing outside of work? Like, do I have a life anymore? At college, I had all my clothes. What do I do? Did you all find hobbies right when you graduated? Were these a helpful outlet? Like, what did life look like right when you're graduating outside of work, and how does it look now? And Alyssa, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure for everyone, what it looks like now is completely different than what we all used to like doing. But when I first graduated, I moved to New York. That's where my first job is right now. And of course, moving to New York City, you're just so excited to see and explore a new city that you're in. So right off the bat, I guess my first hobby is like being a tourist in my own new city, with my roommates and the rest of my friends who moved to New York. And then eventually over time, as I kept saving my money, my next hobby was to travel. I moved a lot throughout my, I guess, teenage life, from the Bay Area to Boston to then New York. And I was super interested in traveling, and that became my hobby. And now during COVID, obviously we can't travel as much as we can or do as much as we can. But to be honest, I'll be completely honest, I haven't picked up a full on new hobby that I like doing as often during COVID. And I think that's just me. I'm just laying low and continuing to watch Netflix. Bachelor is on tonight. I'll continue to do that. I need to figure it out, and that's totally okay.
I think it's more than okay. And I also bet that there's a lot of people tuning in who are like, oh my gosh, I didn't learn how to like bake bread and like make a whipped coffee during COVID. And so I've like wasted the last 9 months. And I think it's
No,
like
you
not
don't need to
everybody is
bake
doing
bread.
that. We're all in this together, and we all don't, we don't need to have mastered everything by the time the vaccine gets out. So I think that's a good helpful reminder. Awesome. Emily?
I was big into sports. So I played basketball, soccer in the club level in college. Graduating, law school, I kept up with that. So I joined a lawyers league, co-ed, which was really helpful. Get to play with, it was mostly guys at the law firm, but you get to play with all the guys, get to become friends with them in a different way. And I loved it. It was a great way to get your exercise in and, I don't know, be competitive in like a good spirited way. During the pandemic, though, I have to say, as like a traditional millennial, I've been all over TikTok, and I love Gen Z because like they got hobbies for days, and I've just been picking up all of their hobbies. So now I'm a dancer. I can bake bread. I can do a lot of other things as well. I'm very, well-rounded thanks to TikTok.
I love that. And I love that you watched the video and then act on it. I think I made like a couple recipes from the TikTok, but I can't say I've.
I don't post them though. I'll like take a video of me doing it, and then I just like send it to one friend and be like, look what I did. Look at me.
An audience. It's fine. Awesome. I'm Toya.
Sure. I would, for me, it was a couple of things, but then I have an additional recommendation. So it was about really like working out, and not like, I didn't like hardcore workout. Like I work out more now than I did like when I first graduated. But it was just making sure that I was active and making sure that I was kind of moving my body. Also, for me, it was travel as well. So as I mentioned before, one of the reasons why I moved to the airline industry is because we could travel. We could travel with that for free. And so we got into like, okay, we're going to go to Amsterdam this weekend, like just for the weekend. So we were doing things that I had never done. Like I didn't have a passport until I graduated from college. And so for me, it was all these new experiences that I took advantage of that weren't available to me. I think something that I hear is saying that the world kind of opens up. Like the more we, from your high school to college, it opens up. From college to post-grad, it opens up, and then beyond. And so the world started to open up. And I think taking advantage of that world opening up for you is something that I would recommend. I would say my ad though is really getting centered in who you are and getting centered in really solid habits and understanding self. And I think, Emily, you may have mentioned to it a second ago, but it made me think about a lot of times, I'll say for women, we're like, okay, who am I going to date? And okay, am I going to get married? And like all of these things start to show up. And I will say a bad relationship will derail every part of your life. And so the more that you start to get centered and understand who you are, create really solid mental health, really solid practices about you, then the better your journey will be for yourself and for others that come in contact with you.
Amen. All right. Again, transitioning awesome into the next question, or the next question that I'm going to ask, which was transitioning out of college. I'll say can be difficult and overwhelming. Do you have any advice for staying on top of your mental and physical health? And Toya, you were already, starting to talk about this. Do you want to keep going?
Sure. I will say there's so many more tools available now than there were, I think, at the time. I'll say for me, and I graduated from college, from undergrad a while ago. But I would say, I graduated from undergrad in 1996. And so, as part of that, mental health was kind of like, oh, you're seeing a counselor? Oh, what's wrong with you? Like, it was still really taboo at that period of time. And I would say, go for it. Like, mental health is positive. That's good. Seeing a counselor, sitting in with a group of peers and talking about what's going on in your life and being expressive about yourself and being healthy and active are positive things that you do for yourself, you do for your community, you do for your family, you do for your future. And so I would say, do not be afraid. Do not step into anyone shaming you or anyone trying to make you feel bad about you taking care of yourself, because you just have to go for it, because you are responsible for you. And that's it. And so I think this is I'll call it an exciting time for mental health, recognizing there's a lot of challenges out there. So I'm not dismissing that at all, but I'm saying that the seeking help and it being something that is seen as a positive thing, this is a new time for that, different than it was for me when I was coming out of undergrad.
I think that's super true. Unfortunately, we're just lucky to have the resources that we have now, I think, especially during COVID. Awesome. Alyssa?
Yeah, I think for me, what helped me, especially during COVID, I feel like COVID was a time where everyone was feeling very down and lonely. For me, at least, I'm pretty extroverted and I lean a lot on my closest friends and my best girlfriends. I think what's so important is to vent and just to feel, like, just talk about how you're feeling. You might not go to someone and ask for advice or solutions, but just to go to your closest friend group or people that you trust to just talk about how you're feeling is super important. Maybe if you're not even comfortable by going to, see someone professionally, that's totally okay. Just having your close knit friends there for you is super helpful. I was in New York by myself during COVID with no roommates in May, and it was so lonely. But just FaceTiming my friends and just venting to them was so helpful. When it comes to resources, like Sarah and Toya mentioned, there's so many resources out there that maybe even your job would love to help pay for you for, whether if it's not insurance, they might even have a stipend for like a health and wellness benefit. There's companies like Headspace and Talkspace that partner with, maybe your employer. So I'd say just be resourceful, but don't forget about your close-knit people around you who support you day to day.
Awesome. And we'll get into a couple more questions about socializing and friends a little bit later. Emily, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think since you're both talking about relationships and your best friends, I think one thing that's really important is selecting who those people are going to be. Who are your best friends? Who is the person that you're spending time with as your significant other? I think you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. People have said that before. I really do believe it. So surround yourself with people that make you feel better, that empower you, because it's the flip side of what Toya just mentioned. A bad relation will take you down, but a really good friendship, a really good relationship, it'll bring you up. It'll make you more empowered. You'll feel better. It'll flip your mental health in the other way too.
That's awesome. And I'll try to grab a link before the this conversation is over, but I read a book recently called Belong by Radha Agrawal, and it's called Belong, and the first 5 chapters are just you sitting down assessing your values. What are the qualities you're looking for a friend? What do you not want in a friend? And how do you shape yourself into the kind of person that's open to receive those friendships? And I would recommend it to folks who are navigating that right now. Awesome. Once you're in that first job, you've graduated, you landed the job, obviously a little bit weird now due to COVID, now that many of us are working from home, but how do you kind of start to build that routine that works for you? Remembering to eat breakfast and maybe packing a lunch and working out and going to make time for friends. How do you kind of build something that serves you positively? Alyssa, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, to be completely honest, when I first started working from home every day, I was so lost. I literally rolled out of bed like 5 minutes before I needed to start working and would work all day in my pajamas. And that's so normal. No one has been through this type of, worldwide pandemic as we did. But um, I actually just started experimenting. I am not a morning person, but then one day I was like, let me just wake up early in the morning and eat breakfast. I never eat breakfast. And now I actually love cooking in the morning before I start working. And then I just added a little bit of routines here and there. And at first I was like, oh, maybe I can start working out in the morning. That did not work out. That only lasted like 2 days. And then I started realizing, oh, like I actually like working out in the middle of the day. Let me block my calendar for lunchtime and start working out. So it's just trying little things here and there to figure out what you like doing. And then I just added more and more routines to my agenda.
That's awesome. And maybe that's where the friends come in too, because maybe
Yeah.
as a part of a routine that you can borrow for yourself. That's certainly how I've
Yeah.
a lot of my routines. Awesome. Emily?
I think when it comes to routines, I've definitely been every which way, depending on what job I'm at, what place I'm at in life. I've been the 5 a.m. workout person, and then that stopped. And then now I'm the smoothie person. I make a smoothie every morning for breakfast, get all the nutrients in. I hope it doesn't stop, but that's where I am. But I think it's okay, flexible, kind of like what Alyssa was just saying, to experiment. And if things change, it's okay. You're adapting to new circumstances in your life. But yeah, keep in mind that there might be something out there for you to make it that much easier. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Toya?
I believe it goes back to creating a plan also, because I think that Emily and Alice are saying that we had a plan, then we flex, and then we did this, and then we flex. And so I think it's better to you create a plan on what you think, okay, this is going to work, this is going to be awesome. And maybe it is awesome, and maybe you're like, yeah, that part don't work. Let me make an adjustment to that. But I find that if you don't have a plan, like you don't have a starting point, you're just like roaming, like, oh, what's it today? I don't know. And so then you really don't attach to anything. So even if you have to like go online and download what's a plan for today, or then just do that and then make adjustments to it and figure out what feels good to you, what feels good to your body, and what works with your work schedule, what have you. So yeah, so just start with a plan and then flex from there.
Awesome. And what I hear you saying is like you have to figure out if that works for you, which I think requires taking the time to sit back and say, is this working for me? Am I putting aside the time to kind of say, did I enjoy doing that? Or am I just doing that because I did that thing yesterday and I'm doing it again today, right? Creating that kind of space to breathe. I think that's awesome. All right, we started to touch on a little bit, but moving into some more career related questions. Did you all take time off between graduating and starting work or going to grad school, or did you go straight into the next thing? And did you like doing that? Do you wish that you did either took time or didn't take time? And Emily, do you want to start us off?
So I went straight from undergrad at Columbia University to law school. I liked doing that. I didn't know anything different. I was a student. I was still a student. So I was fine with that approach. When I graduated law school, I took a month off and traveled before starting work. But I did already have a job lined up. So it made traveling that much more fun. I don't think I would have taken more time off in any other circumstance. And if the job said you have to start right away, I would have done that and I can travel later. But I think at that age, you have so much energy in the whole day that you don't necessarily need to take time off if you can squeeze in extra fun and curriculars in your own day schedule.
Gotcha. Toya?
So I took a lot of time off between the two. So I went straight from high school to undergrad and finished in 4 years. And it was more of an affordability issue. Like I thought, oh, this would be awesome if I could go straight through. But I was like on Sally Mae. Like I could not afford to have any more student loans like coming through. I had to get a job. So I got that job. And then I worked for 10 years before I went back and got my MBA. And I went through an executive MBA program where it was tailored to individuals that had worked for a period of time and at a certain level in the organization. And then I had a cohort of individuals that we went to school like every other weekend and then some full weeks for 18 months. And so that's what worked for me. I'll say the catalyst for that, though, was that in my career, as I was looking at like, what's next, and the company that I was working for at the time was merging with another company. And it was like, if you don't have an MBA, you're only going to get this far. If you don't have an MBA, that's pedigree, that's how it works. So I was like, well, I'm not going to be closed out of this. So I got my MBA 10 years after completing my undergraduate. Also, another impetus that my undergrad grades were just like, okay, like Alyssa talking about journalism, I went to the University of Missouri because I'm like, journalism, I live in Missouri and state, I'm gonna kill it. No, sister, did not. And changed my major to business because I couldn't get into the journalism school. And I needed to like redeem my GPA life, which I did in graduate school. I was also paying for that, but then was reimbursed. So anyway, straight from high school to undergrad, 10 years. Then I went to graduate school and got my MBA.
Awesome. And Alyssa, did you take any time?
No. Similar to what Toya just said, I was super anxious about getting a job way before graduation. Like fall of my senior year, I said, I need to get a job now because I was just so worried about my student loans. Sally Mae, I totally feel your pain, Toya. That literally is like so painful to have every day. But that being said, I'm happy that I took that direction because I feel so much more comfortable and at ease now that I know I can be responsible with my student loans. I know that this is not a thing for everybody because, I mean, it's COVID. A lot of jobs are rescinded, unfortunately, but that doesn't mean that you can't eventually get somewhere. It might not be your first choice, but maybe it's your second or third, and that's totally fine because you're going to get so many jobs. I mean, we're working for most of our life anyway. But I also do want to say, I also want to get my MBA in the future. And I think it depends on if you want to go to get your grad, to get your master's, it depends on what you want to get your master's in. Sometimes it depends on who you speak to. They recommend you work for X amount of years before you get your MBA. Sometimes if you want to get a different master's program, they actually prefer you come right out of undergrad. So I think it's very dependent on what it is you want to do and what it is you want to achieve in however amount of years. And you need to talk to as many people as you can in that field that you're interested in to see what their advice is for your specific interest.
Awesome. I think we might have touched, Elsie, you might have touched on that manager relationship a little bit before. Do you have any recommendations for starting a relationship with a manager off on the right foot? And Toya, why don't you start us off?
So my advice here, and I feel like I come with a couple of hats. Like I come with a leader hat, and then I also come with a parent hat because I do have older children. But it is to come to work prepared, and it's also be of benefit. And what I find sometimes, and I call them new career individuals, is that sometimes I'm seeing more of what can you do for me? I'm here at this company, what are you gonna do for me? And while I have had to flex my leadership skills to accommodate different career individuals, it is still like, oh gosh, okay, all right, let me make sure that I got this like locked down so that my new career millennials, in many cases, not all, can be attached to this role because I really need their talent. And so I really need that insight. I really need that experience, because if I'm only going to work with individuals that have been in the career for a longer period of time, they're not going to give the full lens of what any business needs to grow, period, end story. So we need everybody. And I really need a lot of that new career insight and knowledge. But many times I'm like, all right, but then I have to serve them. And so when I find someone that is a new career person coming to the workforce that is saying, here's what I can do, here's how I contribute, here's how I want to learn, but I'm like, all right, let's hit it. And I will for sure make sure that I'm pouring back into that individual as well. But I will say I get a little worn down when the first thing is like, okay, well, can you tell me what my career path is? Like, can you tell me, like, okay, how am I going to get promoted? And can you tell me? And I'm thinking, seriously, like, I got a deadline to hit. So if that person was like, here's how I contribute, I noticed this, I noticed that, here's how I'm going to do my job and kill it, then that's going to match for me someone that I want to grow and someone that I want to support. But so I think that's for someone coming into the workforce. Those are things that I look for. But I will say that when I feel like I have to serve that individual, then I'm just like, I can't do this.
Well, you have to give before you can receive. If anyone on the call was at any of our last two panels, we talked about LinkedIn and not immediately approaching people with asks, but instead, wanting to develop that relationship. It seems like it applies offline, or I guess with the case of COVID, online as well. So that's good. That's good advice to note. Awesome. Alyssa?
Yeah, for me, I think your relationship with your manager and all your managers are always going to be different. From my experience, I've had 4 managers in the same role in 1 year, and every single one of my managers were so different. You meet people with so many different managerial styles, and that's something that you need to take in and observe first before you figure out what is the best way to communicate with this manager. I've had a manager that's super laid back and super lenient, where I could feel more comfortable being vocal about my opinions or my career goals. I've had other managers where they just need to see the job done, and how you can meet all your expectations or exceed them. So I think it goes both ways. The manager needs to adapt to their team, and you as an individual need to adapt to your managerial style as well. But it's definitely a learning process. For me, I talked about being an advocate for yourself. And I think you should always, always, always be an advocate for yourself, no matter which manager you have. And that's always going to translate to open communication and being transparent with your manager. But there's different ways you can communicate based on how your manager likes to communicate with you. And that's just something you will find out and you'll figure out as you work with them.
Awesome advice. Emily?
Since it's talking about like when you first start to meet them and you're starting to get to know them, as Alyssa was alluding to, you don't really know much. I'll kind of echo what Toya said and say that eagerness. You have to be eager about the menial tasks as well as the big, exciting projects that they're putting you on. Don't go in with like a sucky attitude. Have a smile, be warm. And I think as a lawyer, we love to research. So I would say learn more about who they are, do your diligence on the back end, Google them, Facebook them, read up about them, see if there's common interests that you guys share that you can really dive into and get to know your manager more on a personal level. Because the more that you have in common, the more that they're aware that you guys might share these interests, the more likely that they're willing to invest in you as well and help you grow in your career.
Awesome. We had a question in the chat about kind of pivoting industries and kind of, we talked about this a little bit before, something you started in college, maybe you go and get a different job out of college. How do you kind of like practically go about doing that if you very clearly studied one thing and now you're kind of looking at jobs in maybe a different field and maybe they're like, you need 2 years of experience doing this and you're like, well, I just got here. How do you kind of overcome that? And Alyssa, I see you nodding your head and obviously this is your experience, so would love for you to take this one first.
Yeah, Sarah knows this. I mean, I was all over the place in college. I stuck with one major, but all my internships were so different. But like what Sarah mentioned earlier, there's always going to be that one little tie that connects all the dots when you're pivoting from place to place. It might not be super exact. Like for instance, I studied PR, but I was in branding, marketing, digital marketing consulting. They're all similar and they're all within the same type of field, but they're not exact. But the whole point is PR kind of tied all of them together. And for me, it's really just like taking what I've learned from the previous role or the previous experience and trying to see how that can relate to the next thing. For instance, right now I'm looking into something that's a little bit more product marketing focused. Though I'm in consulting, I'm seeing a lot of different things by working with customers directly on how they interact with Adobe's products. And that is able to be, repeatable when you go to product marketing, learning about the consumer. And from then on, as every step you take, you're gonna tie a knot somewhere, naturally, honestly, because all your interests stem from something else and then from something else. So it'll naturally happen. And at the end of the day, I think for me, it was just constantly being open-minded and researching about other people's roles, and meeting new people and reading new things.
Awesome. Emily?
To echo what Alyssa said and kind of add on to it, you have that string that you are following. And so you have little aspects that will be applicable to the new thing you're interested in. But if there are shortcomings, you can teach yourself. They might say they want someone with 3 years of experience. That's not necessarily the case. So don't be afraid to just apply. Worst case, you get rejected, but always apply. And if you don't have the experience in a specific area, you don't know how to use a specific technology that they're asking for, you can learn. Coursera, there are so many different resources like that where you can take classes and educate yourself. And I think a lot of times employers are looking for people that are very passionate, that have that hustle and interest in what that space is. So if you're transitioning into a new space and you've proven that, all right, I took my own initiative to figure this stuff out, I want to be here, I know you are going to love me if I'm an employee here, I think they'd love to hire you. So give it a shot. It can't hurt.
Awesome. Toya?
I'd add that if you join a larger firm or a larger company, then there are numerous roles within a particular organization. And so say if you are in the finance team and then you want to learn more about marketing, well, like if you're in a larger firm, your company has a finance team and they have a marketing team. So you can say, hey, I'd like to be the finance partner for marketing. So then you learn a bit about marketing. And then you ask the marketing director, hey, I noticed you're working on this project. I'd like to contribute. They most times are not going to say no. They love an extra eye that's free. They're not paying for an additional person on their team. So it's like, oh, yeah. Oh, okay. We started something at Cornerstone called gigging within Cornerstone. And so it's where like if I have a project on my teams, something that I need done, I put it out into the online internal community and someone from any part of the company can say, oh, I want to work on that. And they can work on that project within my team. Likewise, someone in my team could say, oh, I want to work on something in sales. Okay, great. Maybe there's something they can work on there. So I would say a really great way to pivot also is if you're in a role, try internships within the organization within your same role. You're already paid there. You're not looking for someone to hire you per se, but you're looking to work on a project, contribute. And I've seen that really beneficial for people to make changes.
I also want to add too, that is super spot on, Toya, when you said, working in a larger company, there's so many internal opportunities at that company, hopefully at least. But what's also really important is kind of going back to the last question we had is being vocal with your manager, right? If you're interested in something, your manager can connect you with someone in that department. And then the more people you meet, the more conversations you have, the more connections you have, and the more information you're receiving, and the more you're really getting your foot out there. So it also starts with expressing your interest to someone who can help you get there.
All of that was incredible. That gig idea, more people should take on. That's brilliant. Amazing. So we're down to our last 17 minutes, and I still have 2 sections I want to get to. So we're going to move on to finances. What was the first thing that you started saving for, and the question is how much did you put towards it, but really like how did you practically go about saving for it? Emily, why don't you start us off?
Sure. I'm a bit of an anomaly here since I was bootstrapping my business. So I did the traditional IRA, your 401k, put money aside into that, had my expenses to live off of, and then everything else went into my business. So it isn't, I started saving immediately, essentially, but also spending it immediately on everything that had to do with the business, because you got to do that.
I get that. I do.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Emily, or Sarah, did you pivot to me?
Yeah, Toya, go ahead.
Yeah, so I didn't start saving on anything. I was that student that was like in the student comments, like, oh, credit card? Yeah, I'll sign up for that. And I had horrible debt coming out of college. It was like the worst. And so I wasn't saving on anything. I was paying off bad decisions is what I was doing. So I don't know if that's really saving, but it's just kind of like getting out of the hole of like really bad decisions. And so I really didn't start saving until later in life. So I would say that there wasn't really like an initial savings. It was just like, girl, like, why did you do that? So don't do that because it's bad. And then you don't start saving early. And then you just put yourself behind, so far behind where you should be because you're covering for things that you should have done differently.
Word to the wise. There you go. Alyssa?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, went through what Toya went through. I mean, when I got my first paycheck, I was like, oh my God, I'm actually making real money. I'm not a broke college student. I wanted to buy all these outfits that I now can't wear because of COVID. But honestly, like, you really don't start seeing your finances coming in until after at least a year of hard work. And that's totally, totally normal. I'd say the first thing I actually started saving on was, like I said, I like traveling. I wanted to fly back to London. I was able to do that. But then you have to realize, oh shoot, like I saved for that. I need to continue saving. Like I can't just save for one thing. There's more to save for. And to be completely honest, before I started work, I had no idea how I was going to pay off student loans. I had no idea what a 401k was. I had no idea like how to have an investment portfolio or which credit cards to have and why and all these things. But the most important thing is to start somewhere and to start reading about it and to start talking to people about it, because I'm sure not everyone knows how to handle their finances. I mean, I'm so young. Most of us are very young and new in our careers. There's a lot of books out there. I read Broke Millennial right before I started working. I read Smart Women Finish Rich. And there's so many different things out there to just educate yourself on, but don't freak out. We have so many years ahead of us. Just make smart decisions early on.
Awesome. I'll definitely be checking those books out. I feel like there's so many places you can put your money. You have like student loans, and then you have like your IRA, and then you have your 401k. And now I just feel like I'm making up acronyms. How did you kind of approach budgeting? How did you decide where money should go? What did you prioritize? And maybe these were not lessons you learned in your first year, but you picked up over time, and maybe what you would suggest our audience does first. Toya, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I would say first start to build that nest egg. And so I think the recommendation is like 3 to 6 months of savings is crucial to do that after you've done some of the other things. It helps with your mindset. Like it helps with your decision making, like, oh, okay, someone's treating me, because every job is not great. So someone's treating me awful at work. Do I have to stay here? And if you have 3 to 6 months of savings versus having no savings, you may allow yourself, or you may not even really allow yourself, you may stay in some situations that don't serve you because you don't have money saved to serve you, as in like, having dinner. And so I would say the first thing I would recommend really is to get that 3 to 6 months savings plus, and then really start investing. I would say that's something that I was not able to do because of I didn't know, and then a lot of bad decisions. But the compound interest that you can gain year over year over year over year is like super powerful. And so that is what I would recommend: is first get that nest egg so you can make really sound decisions about your life, and then also then start saving, compound.
Awesome. Alyssa?
For me, and I agree with what Toya said, for me it was just what my priorities were. When I came out of college, I had a massive credit card debt because I even traveled in college. Like, what college student can really travel? I did, and just put on a travel credit card. And after college, I was like, oh my goodness, I was freaking out. And the first goal of mine was to knock out this credit card debt. Thank goodness I did. And so a lot of my savings went to my savings account, but a lot of my paycheck went towards the credit card debt, because that will really, if you don't have a good credit score, there's a lot less that you can do out there. Another thing that I ended up doing was really breaking down my student loans. I know a lot of us have loans out there, is knocking out the highest in interest. Sally Mae, I have extremely high interest rates. That high interest rate part of my portion is my priority. Of course, there's a lot of dinners and parties and going out stuff that you would have to sacrifice, but like sacrificing a couple or a few a month is totally worth it for knocking out high interest and credit cards. Another thing I would say too is, for me at least, I've met a lot of people who are super into short-term investing because they have the knowledge to do so. For me, I was a little bit intimidated because I had no idea about investing in Bitcoin or short-term investing. So I'm not going to risk my money to do that. I'd say if you are interested in it, look for a more long-term route and do a lot of research about what it is you're investing for the long term. And of course, your money priorities are going to change over time. During COVID, I was freaked out. I'm sure most people were freaked out they were going to lose their jobs. So I started putting less in investments and more in savings, just in case I needed cash immediately if I lost my job. So definitely be aware of what's happening in the economy, be aware of what your priorities are at the moment and act towards that.
Awesome. Emily?
When I got my first, understanding what my paycheck would be, I worked backwards. Started off, okay, student loans, I'm going to want to pay that off every month. That's that amount. IRA, you can invest, I think it's up to $5,000 a year. So that's the second amount that you should try to set aside if you can. All right, let's take that out. And then the 401k, I think that was capped as well at like 17,000 at my company. So I, tried to figure out, can I max these offerings that would in the end be very beneficial for long-term financial strategy, compounding interest, all of that. Highly recommend you guys watch a documentary about Warren Buffett. He goes deep into it. It's fascinating. And so once I had those numbers kind of put into my analysis of like, this is what I'm getting a month, what's left over. And then I kind of, looked at my lifestyle. I'm like, do I need to have a studio apartment in Manhattan? No, I'll still live with 5 roommates. I love people. I'm an extrovert. I have no desire to spend an exorbitant amount. Let me just stay in a tiny apartment because I don't even need that much space. So it was looking at like, what can I take out as like expensive costs in my life in order to try to hit those goals in that order of priority. Of course, you're not going to necessarily make it every job or every month, but you have a sense of what you're aiming towards and the goals that you've set up for your financial goals.
Awesome. This is all super practical and valuable. So that was awesome. Let's take it home talking about social life and friends. And let's wrap these 2 questions into one, just so we make sure we cover them. How did your relationships with your friends from college change over time? And how did you make your first post-college friends? And Alyssa, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, so sadly, my closest girlfriends and I, our original plan was that we all lived in New York City together, Sex in the City lifestyle. Unfortunately, I was the only one who ended up there and I was so bitter about it. And now we're all in completely different states. And, from seeing your best friends every single day in college and like, just doing nothing together to then barely seeing each other, if it's like every few months, every 4 months, it was definitely difficult. And that's how it changed. When people are leaving your environment, there's also more people coming in your environment. So it's really important to stay close and stay connected with those friends of yours who you might not live close with anymore. And that's, for me, it's just going to fly to LA if I can to see them, or taking the train to Boston to see them, and just staying connected when we can. It's hard, but the truth of the matter is not your whole friend group will live in the same exact neighborhood or city as you will for your whole life. Another thing is meeting new people after college. Fortunately, I joined a program at Adobe that is all new grads, university hires. And I would highly advise, if you find it important to have coworkers as friends, I highly advise you to look for a rotational program or a specific university hire program so that you're surrounded with people who have gone through the same work experience or college experience as you have. And my first friends in New York outside of school were definitely these coworkers of mine. And we're more than just coworkers now. I think we're going to be friends for a really long time, whether or not we're at Adobe or at a different company.
Oh, that's so endearing. That's awesome. And
Sorry, did you say my name, Sarah?
yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, that's the one sad thing, is that you don't get to see everybody like you used to. It's inevitable. People have their own schedule. If you go into law school, you have a whole new bunch of friends. If someone goes to business school, they're going to be obsessed with their new friends there. They're at work, they're busy at work all day. And so your schedules just misalign as well, even if you are in the same city, and that's bound to happen. But what the good thing is that you kind of weed out the weak. You weed out the clutter. You have so many friends in college, you don't really need them all. Like I was saying before, surround yourself with the best, choose your friends wisely, spend your time with people that really are going to make you better people in the end. And so as you get older, the ones that are your true friends will always be there. Even if you don't talk for 5 months, 6 months, you call them and it's like you've never missed a beat. And that's something special, and just nurture it. Take that time once a year to try to plan that group trip with whoever's left in the group, which will be your fan favorites anyway. So it's even better trip now. So I think, yeah, it's sad, but it's also a really good thing in the end, the way that friendships develop over time. Yeah.
Awesome. And Toya, take us home.
Sure. I'll say my best friend that I met in undergrad is still my best friend today. But it's an anomaly because there was a group of us. And now there is two. But meaning that we're just like life, when we talk about life, there's all kinds of curveballs. Life takes you up and down in situations where you just don't anticipate. And for my girlfriend, she and I have weathered every storm. We've been support systems for each other through every up and down. And it is very endearing and very necessary for her as being part of my life. But at the same time, I've lost friends along the way. And in some cases, it's painful though, because you're just like, this is like a really bad breakup. Like this is a relationship that will end. And some of them will end just because we all have different journeys. And I think that's part of the life cycle or the friendship cycle, is that some stay, some leave. And then Sarah, to your second part of the question is, and the new join. And I've also, in my first year in Minnesota, where I was like, what kind of cold is this? Like, I'd never experienced anything like that. I gained new friends because, Alyssa, like you were saying, like the new hires, it was like a group of like new entrants into Minnesota. And so there was, I don't know how this got started, but we just kind of all hung out together. And then a couple were my sorority sisters, and we're still really great friends now today. So I think the common interests and the common time together is what helps build new friendships throughout that journey. But I think it's the recognition that all of them don't always stay.
And what a beautiful tie-in to our whole conversation about growth and zigzag journeys. And, you're there the whole time and everyone else will come and go, and maybe some will stay. So I think that's all beautiful and wonderful. And we are now reaching the end of the hour. This was phenomenal. I feel like refreshed and like at peace about my own post-grad journey. I hope that our audience feels the same way. I feel like we're just like all like lounging in a living room together, even though it's like Zoom. And I hope you all feel like you were there as well. If you are interested in joining us for the rest of our launch week events, you can just RSVP holdette.com/launch week. Also, if you RSVP'd and got the confirmation for this email, you already have the link to all of the events, but definitely share it with your friends and family members. And as a reminder, you can follow us on Instagram to stay up to date about all of our future events and to learn more about the giveaways that we're doing this week. Thank you all so much for coming, and thanks so much again to our panelists.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Sarah.
And congratulations again on the launch.
Yes, congrats.